Hi everyone, welcome to this new video. I'll be giving you an update on my tank today, and especially regarding LPS corals, large polyp stony corals. As you know, I have a mixed reef, so it contains all kinds of different corals, ranging from the harder corals, so SPS, which are essentially small polyp stony corals, so they have mainly a hard skeleton, which you see, and then expanding from that are small polyps, which you can see when you're looking up close. And then you have large polyp stony corals, which are essentially also stony corals, so their skeleton is based on calcium, and their polyps are a lot larger, hence also the name large polyp stony corals. My tank is somewhat higher on nutrients, so that means that my nitrates and phosphates are higher than you'll find in an average reef tank. My phosphates are around 0.2 and my nitrates are around 20. So when you're having a small polyp stony coral aquarium with a lot of Acropora, for example, those seem like alarming values, but when you're rocking a mixed reef with more soft corals and large polyp stony corals, it's actually not that big of a deal, since the tank is able to, the corals are able to adapt to those conditions. As long as you don't, as those values are relatively stable, so you don't want your phosphates to be going from 0.02 to 0.2 in less than a few days, because that will definitely cause issues. But when when the values are changing gradually, then that's not that big of a deal. So that was about it for the introduction. As you can see, my tank is filled with various corals, but today we're going to look at the LPS corals. The first and most obvious one that I'm going to show you is this piece of Duncan coral. Its full name is, I think, Duncansomia axiofuga or something like that. It's a quite difficult name to pronounce, especially since they're all in Latin. But yeah, it really is one big and beautiful coral. As you can see, the polyps are extending very well. They are. I want to show you, but it's so filled with polyp that it's hard to show you the actual skeleton of the coral. Maybe from this side I can show you a little bit. Yeah, it's hard with the reflections. Essentially, this is a branching coral which has thick branches, and at the end of each branch is a tip, and from each tip a polyp will emerge. So as you can see, for example, here, this is one of the polyps. It has a mouth, so it can actually eat as well. They are both photosynthetic, as well as they like to eat something now and again, so they filter the water, but they also, when they are able to, they catch a little bit of mysis or krill or whatever you put in there, and they will devour it as well. Yeah, this is a piece that I've had for a long time. I think I've had it in my tank for about 3 years now. I bought it from someone when it was just 7 little heads on one little branch, and now it has expanded to well over 50 heads. And yeah, this huge ball of Duncans. Duncan is the short name for Duncans, for this coral. So next up is Blastomussa. I have various species of Blastomussa in my tank. You can tell it's a Blastomussa by the shape of the coral. Actually, as you can see right here, it has a very distinct shape and a very distinct texture as well. When you look at the edges, there's a kind of a pattern, and by this pattern you can very well recognize them. They are in various colors, sizes. Here are 2 of them. On the left you'll see one that is somewhat more bright red with somewhat more green, and on the right, the one on the right is a little bit more soft colored. I've also had that for a very long time, starting off with just three heads, And yeah, you can see the polyps waving in the current here. It's really nice to watch, really fun to watch, since they're having so much, they're enjoying the water so much, and it's always good to see happy and healthy corals. I'm going to quickly skip to the other Blastomussa I have in my tank. This is from the same species, so it's the same texture you'll see, only the color is different. These ones are completely red, and they have a small green mouth, but it's hard to recognize, it's hard to see. Oh yeah, here you can see it a little bit. The mouth is a little green piece on the coral. As you can see, same texture here, little balls of tissue, so they really shape up well. There's one other piece of Blastomussa I have in my tank, but it's somewhat here to the back, somewhat harder to see. I'll zoom in for you. It's right here. And that one, I forgot the name, but it's a smaller piece. They're smaller polyps, still an LPS coral, but the polyps are definitely smaller than the other ones I've just showed you. And as you can see, the texture is also somewhat different. So, moving on. One of my favorite LPS corals is the Goniopora. There are various species of Goniopora. The short polyp one and long polyp one. I'll first show you the long polyp Goniopora, which are right here. They all look kind of the same, but they're all slightly different. This one right here is just a plain red Goniopora. It's just a frag, so it's not that big, but it's nice, it's long, it's very wavy whenever it's waving in the current, as you can see right here. Then here are two next together. You can slightly see that they're slightly different. The one on the back, I'll show you like this. It used to have even more colors, but as you can see, it's reddish with purplish tips. So let's call it a purple tip Goniopora from now on. And I've had it for 1.5 to 2 years already. So it's been doing really well in my tank. And the latest addition is this one. And I think it's the most beautiful one of all. It's also a red one, but it has green yellowish centers, so the mouths are greenish yellowish, especially when the lights are more dim and more blue, then you'll definitely see it pop. And yeah, it's a really beautiful piece of coral, which I picked up about 3 months ago with my local fish store. And it's been doing really well. Well, you can see they're all doing quite well. They're all wavy, enjoying the gyre flow that is provided by them by the Maxspect gyre. And yeah, they look healthy. Another piece I want to show you is this Caulastrea. I have two species. Oh no, first. Oh, let's skip to the other Goniopora. I almost forgot. This one is the Goniopora that is also nice. It's a short polyped Goniopora, so as you can see, it's more of a ball. The polyps are extending only about 0.5 centimeter or a centimeter, so in that way it also keeps its shape really well. But it's in essence it's the same coral as the red ones I just showed you. This one is purple with pinkish centers. And yeah, it's also expanding and waving in the current, albeit a little less wavy because of the shorter polyps. Back to the Caulastrea I was showing you. This is one of the Caulastrea that I have had for, I think this is the coral that I have in my tank for as long as I can remember. It's one of the first corals I bought. When I bought it, it was one head, so as you can see, the heads are distinguished by their purplish brownish edges and a bright green bluish center. And I bought one of them for €5 at a local fish store. Back then I didn't even know what it was, and I just put it in my tank, and it has been growing ever since. It's now has formed a nice ball. I can show you like this, and it's growing and expanding, and As you can see right here, this is a nice example of how this coral multiplies itself. One of the heads will start to divide itself somewhere in the middle. As you can see, this one head is turning into 3 heads as we speak. It might take another month, maybe another 2 months, and then there will be 3 separate heads. And that's how they multiply and grow. The other Calastrea I have is on top here. It's actually near the very top of the tank. I can show you like this. Usually LPS corals are somewhat in the middle lower section of the tank, but I found that this Calastrea, this specific one, can handle a lot of light. It doesn't have that much flow, although it's close to the gyre. It's in indirect flow, but yeah, you can see it's expanding well. The colors are very bright. It's actually even kind of hard to put it on camera without over or under saturating it. I think this looks the best. The color is, well, toxic green yellow, and yeah, it's sitting there. It's happy. It's expanding. This one I bought as 10 heads, around 10 heads, so it was also kind of a small frag, and has grown like this in about 1.5 years. Now, to move on to a somewhat more common coral, which you'll probably have in your own tank as well, is I think it's called a frogspawn coral in English. We call it a hammer coral because the heads, as you can see, are shaped like small hammers, both on the green one as on the purple one with the green base. You might have this coral in your own tank. It's fairly common, it's not hard to come by. They grow pretty rapidly, so they form new heads every now and then they will get bigger and bigger, and it's also very easy to frag them, as you can just cut off or break off one of the branches and just sell it to someone or give it to someone. So it's very easy to frag and a very common coral, but nevertheless very nice, and I'm glad I have one of those in my tank. One more, it's more of a hybrid coral. It's a Chalice. It has been called, I've been looking it up, a bubble gum chalice. Chalices are, sometimes some kind of chalices are SPS and some kind of chalices are LPS. This one is defined as LPS since there's soft tissue on the top of the chalice, and it even forms little bubbles, as you can see right here. So the texture of the coral is soft, and you can tell it's an LPS coral by these small little bulbs on top. I also really like the color. Red with a bit of blue inside, and it's mixed very neatly. The edges are or red, sorry, and although it doesn't grow very fast, it always looks nice and always seems happy. Medium light, medium flow, nothing too special, but nevertheless it's doing really well. Moving on to the next one, and it might be one of the last that I'm going to show you today, is this bright green torch. There's a special story attached to this one. I used to have a big green torch. I used to have two clownfish as well, 2 Nemos, and they were hosting the torch, but since I did a rescape of my tank, I had to get rid of the torch, and I sold the clownfish with them, since they were hosting in the coral. And then suddenly, all of a sudden, somewhere in my tank, I saw something green appearing, and apparently the torch had spawned during the night, and there were 2 places on which new torches were growing, and at first it was really hard to see, and then at a certain moment it had a skeleton, it had a base, and I could just break it off between the rocks and put it on a new place. I'll try to show you, it's a bit hard, I've glued it to the rocks, but as you can see, it had just yeah, it's just it has spawned from the other coral to another place in my aquarium and grew a new head. So it's actually a baby of one of the corals I previously had, and yeah, that's why I'm keeping it, because it's something that has occurred naturally in my tank, which is something I think most reef tank owners will really like, the idea of that tank is stable enough to cause corals to spawn, and in that way create baby corals. Now that I've mentioned one of the last, I think maybe this is the actual last one. This is also a Chalice. At first I didn't know what it was, because the one I bought it from, it was very retracted on its skeleton. So it seemed like an SPS coral, maybe even a Goniopora. But when I put it in my tank and I've let it sit there for a few weeks, it started to show its full potential. It's a bluish Chalice, also an LPS Chalice, which is it's solid blue, but the edges are nice and round. I can show you from the back. That's very easy for me to show you that it's an LPS coral. As you can see here, the base is a hard base with a hard skeleton, and then so the polyp is coming out of that hard base, and you can see it's a soft tissue, and that's one of the ways you can recognize an LPS coral when you see one. So I'm sure there are some of the LPS corals that I haven't covered yet. Now that I'm seeing it, I see a golden torch, which I haven't touched upon yet. But then again, you can't cover everything in just one video. So we're going to do with this for now. I hope you like my explanation. I hope you understood it. I hope you are encouraged to keep LPS corals, since they are relatively easy to keep, even if your tank values aren't as stable as you would need in a purely SPS Acropora tank. It's much easier to keep LPS corals, to keep them happy, to keep them alive. So I would encourage you to look into them. They have very nice colors, as you can see, ranging from green to red, bright colors, which show very nice under good lighting circumstances, especially also in the evening when the colors are more blue. Then they will reflect really well. They are they are a feast to look at. So I hope I've been able to encourage you to look into LPS corals, to buy more, to expand your tank, and I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one. Bye bye.